Luigi Manioni, a 27-year-old Ivy League graduate, now confined to a federal cell, facing murder charges, stalking allegations, and the possibility of execution. Prosecutors claim the act was calculated, deliberate, and targeted, and they are seeking the harshest punishment available. 3 separate legal systems are pursuing him at the same time. Right now, he is held inside one of America's most notorious federal detention facilities, a place federal judges have described as troubling and inhumane when speaking about the conditions inside. Yet something unexpected is happening behind those walls. Other inmates gave him a name. They call him the Ambassador. More than $800,000 has poured in from strangers who have never spoken to him. Images have surfaced showing him smiling beside fellow prisoners, looking less like an outcast and more like someone absorbed into prison life. How does a man potentially facing execution become a symbol behind bars? What are prosecutors doing that his lawyers say violates legal boundaries? And why are inmates warning that his current existence may be harder to survive than death row itself? What's happening inside is darker and stranger than the headlines suggest. December 4th, 2024. A Manhattan sidewalk during the morning rush. Brian Thompson, Chief Executive Officer of United Healthcare, was shot and killed in broad daylight. 5 days later, inside a Pennsylvania McDonald's, Luigi Manioni was arrested, handcuffed, and his former life disappeared. But here's what matters. The walls holding him now are the same walls federal judges have called a humanitarian crisis. Before we go further, you need to understand this facility. A federal judge once admitted he would rather drop charges than send someone to the facility now holding Luigi Manioni. The conditions inside are notorious, prompting federal investigations, lawsuits, and repeated warnings from former inmates. What Luigi endured in his first 48 hours explains why his lawyers are fighting with such intensity. Let's take it back to the beginning. After his arrest, Luigi was initially placed at the State Correctional Institution in Huntington, Pennsylvania, a maximum security facility that became his temporary cage for nearly 2 weeks in December 2024. Within SCI Huntington, Luigi was assigned to DB block, not an ordinary cell block. This section had historically housed death row inmates awaiting execution. Imagine that, before any conviction, Luigi was already treated as a man condemned. Every movement triggered total lockdown. When he left his cell, the entire block froze. No other prisoner could move. The silence was absolute, and every step he took was a reminder of the weight of the walls around him. He wasn't permitted to wear the standard orange jumpsuit. Instead, he was placed in a safety smock, a padded, tear-resistant garment designed specifically to prevent self-harm. Authorities clearly believed his mental state was fragile enough to justify extreme precautions. Yet what followed was entirely unexpected and captured national attention. News crews gathered outside the facility, broadcasting live coverage. Inside, prisoners watched intently. When they saw reporters outside, they began shouting from their windows, voices bouncing off concrete walls, "Free Luigi!" They protested conditions and screamed against what they perceived as unfair treatment. The actions escalated, lights flashed from cell windows, creating improvised signals. Reporters attempted to communicate directly with the inmates. Questions were met with loud, deliberate responses. The prisoners detailed the food, the isolation, the stress, the inhumane treatment, and one former inmate later described the noise as the loudest in the block in over a decade. Prison officials were outraged. Warnings were issued. Any further demonstration would result in solitary confinement. Freedom of speech was immediately curtailed. 2 weeks later, Luigi was moved in the early hours before dawn. But this was no routine transfer. It was a highly orchestrated spectacle. Mayor Eric Adams arrived personally. Dozens of heavily armed officers formed a perimeter, and cameras recorded every moment. Luigi was escorted as if in a cinematic production. Lawyers later described it as a superhero movie-style operation. They argued the display violated his constitutional rights, creating an image of guilt before a trial, poisoning the jury pool. During the event, the mayor spoke of terrorism and violence, yet did not mention the presumption of innocence, due process, or the right to a fair trial. From that point, Luigi entered the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, and the true ordeal began. MDC Brooklyn, located in Sunset Park, houses approximately 1,100 inmates. Its reputation is notorious. Judges have described the conditions as deeply troubling, and some have warned they would rather dismiss charges than send someone there. The facility has a history of crises. In winter 2019, inmates were left without heat or electricity for weeks. The resulting lawsuit was settled for $10 million. More recently, several detainees faced charges for orchestrating violence from inside, including multiple attempted murders. In one documented case, an attack lasted over 15 minutes while staff members were present but did not intervene. Oversight failures continue to raise questions. Inside MDC Brooklyn, there are two distinct worlds. One side houses high-profile detainees under strict control. The other side, according to former inmates, is chaotic, violent, and dangerous. Luigi was placed on the controlled side to ensure his safety. Even here, his daily life was confined and stark. He ate alone, had minimal human interaction, and existed within a cell measuring 15 by 6 feet. A concrete bed, a small sink, a toilet, and a desk comprised his universe. That was his world. Months passed, and an unexpected transformation occurred. Luigi began adapting. Inmates noticed his demeanor and behavior, following his example. Guards treated him differently. Photos surfaced of him smiling, interacting with others. How does someone facing possible execution earn respect in such a place? Luigi became known among inmates as the ambassador. He helped new prisoners adjust, offering guidance and creating small routines that brought structure to both his life and theirs. He took a job as an orderly, maintaining cleanliness and order in the common areas. No disciplinary actions were recorded, no incidents reported. Supporters contributed over $800,000 to his legal defense. Fellow inmates referred to him as a brother. Despite the confinement and pressure, Luigi carved a place for himself in a brutal environment, earning respect and a level of influence that few detainees achieve. Months into his incarceration, the complexity of Luigi's legal battle became apparent. He faced 3 separate prosecutions: federal charges, New York state charges, and Pennsylvania state charges. His lawyers argued that this was unconstitutional, violating protections against double jeopardy. The same evidence from the same incident was being used by 3 different jurisdictions simultaneously. The federal charges were the most severe: murder through the use of a firearm, persistent stalking behavior, and possession of restricted items. The federal case carried the death penalty. Then came a move that shocked the legal world. The government publicly declared its intention to pursue the death penalty before Luigi was formally indicted by a grand jury. Legal experts called this unprecedented. Defense attorneys immediately filed motions, arguing that the announcement created prejudicial pressure, shaping public perception before trial. High-profile statements like this, they contended, made it nearly impossible to find jurors who could remain impartial. By September 2025, Luigi appeared in court. One charge was dismissed, providing the first glimmer of victory in months. However, the other prosecutions continued with full force. The potential punishment remained immense, possibly even more severe than facing a single federal death penalty trial. Judge Gregory Caro ruled on September 16, 2025, dismissing the terrorism-enhanced murder charge in the state case due to insufficient evidence presented to the grand jury. But Luigi still faced second-degree murder, which carries a potential sentence of 15 years to life, with parole possible. Unlike federal court, New York does not impose the death penalty. Yet Luigi's battles continued on 3 fronts, with separate proceedings in federal, state, and Pennsylvania courts. His next federal hearing was scheduled for December 1, 2025. Each court required his presence and attention, while his lawyers navigated the complex web of simultaneous prosecutions. Throughout all of this, MDC Brooklyn remained unyielding. In March 2025, the prison suspended all general visits, citing modified operations. Inmates still received meals, water, medical care, and showers, but the isolation intensified. Contraband remained a problem despite repeated searches, and violence continued intermittently. Luigi remained confined, navigating life in a world defined by rigid walls, constant surveillance, and the uncertainty of multiple legal threats. Every day was a reminder of the delicate balance between survival and punishment. Even with these constraints, Luigi continued to adapt. He studied legal documents, maintained his orderly duties, and developed relationships with other inmates. His influence grew quietly, yet significantly, turning him into a symbol both inside and outside the prison walls. Public debate raged around his case, touching on issues from corporate accountability to inequality in America. Social media campaigns gained traction, and public perception became a crucial factor in the broader narrative. At 27 years old, Luigi faced a reality many cannot fathom: the possibility of execution, life imprisonment, and the constant mental strain of confinement. Prison consultants described MDC Brooklyn's maximum security housing as grueling, loud, chaotic, and mentally taxing. Former inmates warned that if Luigi were sent to one of New York's maximum security penitentiaries without protective custody, he would face a level of hardship few survive, with limited out-of-cell time, persistent gang violence, and frequent lockdowns. Every day, Luigi remained at MDC Brooklyn, reading legal discovery, completing his duties as an orderly, and interacting minimally with other inmates. Yet his reputation as the ambassador grew. He became a stabilizing presence, an example of resilience in the midst of relentless pressure. Despite this, the conditions remained punishing. Cold concrete walls, fluorescent lights, continuous noise, and the ever-present threat of violence defined life inside. Facing 3 simultaneous prosecutions with execution on the line was a burden unlike any other, a test of endurance in the truest sense. By late 2025, Luigi Manioni's daily existence had become a delicate choreography of survival, routine, and mental endurance. MDC Brooklyn offered a semblance of structure, yet it remained a place where tension could erupt without warning. The controlled side, where Luigi was housed, gave him a degree of safety, but it also imposed isolation. He ate alone, spent hours confined to a narrow cell, and experienced only limited human interaction. The lack of sunlight, the constant hum of fluorescent lighting, and the ever-present watchfulness of guards created a world where days blended into each other, and the concept of time lost meaning. Despite these restrictions, Luigi remained remarkably composed. He filled his hours reading thousands of pages of legal discovery, meticulously reviewing charges, witness statements, and surveillance footage. Each case required its own strategy, and his legal team faced the Herculean task of defending him across 3 separate jurisdictions simultaneously. Federal prosecutors were relentless, intent on securing the ultimate punishment. The New York State case loomed with the threat of life imprisonment, while Pennsylvania pursued lesser charges, including forgery and false identification. For Luigi, there was no escape from the constant pressure. The conditions inside MDC Brooklyn amplified the psychological strain. Former inmates described the maximum security units as loud, chaotic, and mentally exhausting. Even on the controlled side, the constant presence of steel doors, the clanging of locks, and the occasional screams from other wings created a stressful environment. Guards maintained strict supervision, but contraband, smuggled cell phones, and illicit activity still occurred, reminding detainees that violence could erupt at any time. For Luigi, the environment was a constant test of vigilance, patience, and psychological endurance. Amid this, an unexpected phenomenon unfolded. Luigi began to exert influence within the prison, earning respect and admiration from fellow inmates. His demeanor, intellect, and discipline distinguished him from the general population. Inmates began referring to him as the ambassador, a title that symbolized both respect and his ability to navigate the rigid hierarchies of prison life. He helped newcomers acclimate, mediated disputes, and adhered to prison rules with meticulous care. Even guards reportedly recognized his unique position, observing that he maintained composure where others might falter. Photographs surfaced showing Luigi interacting with other inmates, smiling, and participating in routine tasks. The images contradicted the brutal reputation of MDC Brooklyn, illustrating a detainee who had found ways to adapt, and maintain a sense of purpose despite facing extraordinary legal jeopardy. Yet beneath this composed exterior, the stakes remained staggering. Federal prosecutors were pursuing charges that carried the death penalty, and each procedural step could potentially bring him closer to execution. Meanwhile, the state cases threatened decades of imprisonment, leaving Luigi in a perpetual state of uncertainty. The public dimension of Luigi's case intensified the pressure. Following the early announcement by the U.S. Attorney General that the death penalty would be sought, media coverage was relentless. National headlines, televised reports, and social media commentary framed him as guilty in the court of public opinion. Defense attorneys argued that this violated the presumption of innocence, creating near-impossible conditions for a fair trial. The timing of these announcements, made before formal indictments, established a narrative that legal experts called unprecedented, and it forced Luigi's lawyers to contend with not only the law but also the media's influence on potential jurors. By the fall of 2025, courtroom battles became the focal point of Luigi's life. Hearings in federal court addressed the constitutionality of prosecuting him simultaneously across multiple jurisdictions. Motions were filed to challenge procedural missteps, and arguments were made regarding the potential for trial prejudice due to pretrial publicity. Defense teams meticulously dissected every procedural action, seeking to preserve Luigi's rights and challenge the government's aggressive approach. Every ruling, every objection, and every motion carried implications that could determine whether Luigi faced execution or life imprisonment. In parallel, social and public advocacy added another layer to the narrative. Supporters organized online campaigns, street demonstrations, and even fundraising efforts for legal defense. Over $800,000 was contributed from individuals who had never met Luigi, reflecting a growing public fascination with his story. The hashtag #FreeLuigi circulated widely, inspiring murals, street art, and even fashion merchandise echoing his court appearances. These symbolic gestures underscored the cultural and political dimensions of the case, demonstrating that Luigi had become more than an individual facing prosecution. He had become a symbol. Yet, prison life remained unrelenting. Even as he gained influence and respect, the daily reality was brutal. Meals in his cell, limited interaction, constant surveillance, and the psychological weight of isolation defined his existence. Any misstep could provoke disciplinary action, and the surrounding environment was a constant reminder of the volatility of confinement. Luigi's ability to maintain composure, adapt, and exert influence within these constraints was a testament to resilience, strategy, and psychological fortitude. The legal complexity compounded the psychological strain. Federal prosecutors pursued murder, stalking, and possession charges with death penalty eligibility. The New York State case added potential life imprisonment, and Pennsylvania pursued forgery and false identification charges. The U.S. Attorney General's early announcement intensified scrutiny, highlighting the unprecedented nature of the case. Defense attorneys emphasized the importance of impartiality, pointing to potential juror bias resulting from media coverage, and filed motions challenging the procedural timing. Every hearing became a battle not just over evidence, but over the narrative itself. In MDC Brooklyn, routine and structure became Luigi's anchors. Reading legal documents, performing orderly duties, and engaging with fellow inmates provided focus, purpose, and a sense of control in an environment defined by unpredictability. The job as an orderly allowed him to create small victories, exert discipline, and maintain a presence within the prison community. He became a stabilizing figure, both practically and symbolically, while the outside world debated his guilt, punishment, and public persona. Months passed, and Luigi's status as the ambassador solidified. Fellow inmates sought his advice, respected his decisions, and even emulated his conduct. His behavior challenged typical expectations of high-profile detainees, illustrating a unique ability to navigate both social hierarchies and institutional pressures. Guards reportedly observed that he maintained calm and order where others faltered, further reinforcing his exceptional position within a notoriously difficult facility. Despite his adaptation, the stakes remained extraordinary. Federal charges carried potential execution. State charges imposed the threat of decades in prison. The combination of uncertainty, public scrutiny, and confinement created a psychological burden few could endure. Experts in correctional systems noted that MDC Brooklyn, even on the controlled side, was mentally taxing, and that long-term survival required vigilance, discipline, and strategic awareness. Public perception continued to influence the case. Media coverage highlighted the spectacle of Luigi's transfers, the debates over prosecutorial conduct, and the broader societal implications of corporate accountability, inequality, and justice. Social campaigns amplified the story, turning Luigi into a symbol of resilience, controversy, and debate. The intersection of prison life, legal battles, and public narrative created a multi-layered pressure, testing both his mental fortitude and the strategic capacity of his legal team. As 2025 drew to a close, the convergence of prison, court, and public attention defined Luigi's reality. Each day at MDC Brooklyn represented a battle for survival, mental stability, and legal vindication. Reading thousands of pages of discovery, completing orderly duties, and navigating relationships with other inmates became a daily regimen, providing structure in a world of uncertainty. Yet every procedural development, every courtroom motion, and every media report reminded him that the stakes were existential. Luigi's ability to endure, adapt, and assert influence transformed him into a figure of both internal and external significance. Inside MDC Brooklyn, he became a model detainee and a mediator. Outside, he symbolized debates over justice, media influence, and systemic accountability. His story revealed the extraordinary complexity of modern incarceration, the pressures of simultaneous prosecutions, and the psychological weight of living under constant threat of death or long-term imprisonment. Today, Luigi remains at MDC Brooklyn. Each morning begins in the narrow confines of his cell. Each night ends with uncertainty about the future. The walls, the lights, the sounds, and the constant threat of violence create a space where freedom is suspended, and every action carries weight. Despite the pressure, he continues to read, perform his duties, and maintain his influence. Fellow inmates call him the ambassador, a title earned through resilience, strategy, and respect. The legal battle continues as 3 prosecutions, federal, state, and Pennsylvania, push forward. The U.S. Attorney General's unprecedented actions, combined with the public spectacle of transfers and media coverage, create a complex environment where legal strategy, psychological endurance, and public perception intersect. Luigi's survival depends not only on law and procedure, but also on his capacity to navigate human relationships, institutional pressures, and personal resilience. His existence is defined by the tension between freedom and confinement, life and potential execution. The cold concrete, relentless fluorescent lighting, constant noise, and ever-present psychological strain create a reality that challenges both mind and body. Yet Luigi endures. He adapts. He influences. He survives. His story is not merely one of crime and prosecution. It is a portrait of human resilience in the face of extraordinary legal and psychological pressure. For anyone observing, Luigi Manioni embodies a paradox. Facing the potential of death, life imprisonment, and ongoing prosecution, he has cultivated respect, influence, and a symbolic presence inside one of America's most challenging prisons. Every page of legal discovery, every routine task, every interaction with fellow inmates reinforces his ability to endure. And yet, the ultimate outcomes remain uncertain. Each day at MDC Brooklyn is a reminder that the space between freedom and confinement, between life and death, is as psychologically brutal as it is legally complex. Luigi's case illustrates more than the story of one man. It exposes systemic issues, questions of fairness, media influence, procedural anomalies, and the psychological realities of high-security incarceration. His survival, adaptation, and symbolic significance reveal the ways individuals navigate extreme environments. Yet beneath the surface lies the persistent, pressing weight of uncertainty, the potential for execution, life sentences, and the relentless scrutiny of multiple courts. The story continues. Luigi remains in MDC Brooklyn, awaiting the outcomes of his federal, state, and Pennsylvania cases. Every day he reads, works, interacts, and endures. Every night, he sleeps under the constant shadow of uncertainty. He has become both a participant in and symbol of a legal, social, and institutional system that tests the limits of human resilience. In the space between freedom and death, Luigi Manioni endures, adapts, and survives. Whether you view Luigi as guilty or innocent, as criminal or symbol of resilience against a broken system, one fact remains undeniable. His ordeal began long before any verdict. Federal judges have repeatedly described these conditions as deeply troubling, with documented evidence to prove it. His next court date approaches. His legal team continues battling on multiple fronts. Conflicts that could stretch for months, perhaps years. And throughout it all, he remains confined behind those walls in that cell in that facility. This is Luigi Manioni's untold story. The reality that exists beyond headlines, hashtags, and political spectacle. No matter what happens in the courts, his fate may be decided, but the punishment has already begun. The fluorescent lights hum above. The steel doors remain locked, and Luigi Manioni waits, facing a future completely beyond his control.